These days, most people don't leave the house empty-handed. Phone, keys, and usually something for protection. Pepper spray clipped to a keychain, maybe a personal alarm buried in a bag. It's not about being dramatic, it's just how things are now. The world feels unpredictable, and people try to stay ready. Still, no matter how cautious you are, there's this quiet assumption that danger won't show up where you feel most at ease. That assumption is exactly what makes this case hit so hard. Brianna Dennison was only 19 years old. She was a college student studying child psychology, the kind of major you choose when you genuinely care about people. Friends said she had an easy vibe, friendly, warm, the type who could talk to anyone and make it feel natural. Brianna wasn't reckless. She just trusted the world a little more than she should have had to. In January 2008, she headed back to Reno, Nevada, for winter break. Nothing sketchy about it. Reno was home. Her old friends were there. She was crashing at an off-campus apartment with people she knew well. By all accounts, it was a chill setup, familiar, comfortable, safe. Brianna had already been through more than most people her age. When she was 6, her father died by suicide while facing serious legal trouble. It shattered her family. Her mom, Bridget, was suddenly raising 2 kids on her own, doing everything she could to keep life moving forward. That kind of loss sticks with you. Still, Brianna grew up resilient, open-hearted, optimistic, and determined not to let tragedy define her. As she got older, she really lived. She loved traveling, loved new experiences, and wasn't afraid to go after what excited her. By the time she enrolled at Santa Barbara City College, it felt like she was finally in her groove. School was going well. Her future looked solid. Winter break was supposed to be a reset. A chance to hang out, catch up, and enjoy the freedom of being young. On the night of January 19th, Brianna and her friends bounced between student events and parties, loud music, packed rooms, the usual college chaos. The kind of night that flies by before you even realize how late it's gotten. Eventually, they headed back to the apartment near the University of Nevada. Everyone was wiped. Brianna decided to crash on the living room couch instead of taking a bedroom. She grabbed a pillow, a couple of blankets, and a stuffed bear she liked sleeping with. It wasn't a big deal. Just one of those casual, last-minute decisions you don't think twice about. The front door was left unlocked, something the roommates did all the time. No one thought it was a problem. Nothing woke them up. No noise. No screams. But when morning came, Brianna was gone. And the place that had felt completely safe was about to tell a very different story. What Brianna's friends noticed next inside that apartment would flip everything upside down. And make it clear this wasn't a simple case of someone walking away. The morning of January 20th started off quiet. Too quiet. The apartment still had that post-party calm, the kind where everyone's moving slow, half awake, just trying to get their bearings. Brianna's friends got up and started their day, not really thinking much of anything at first. When they didn't see Brianna on the couch, it didn't immediately set off alarms. They figured she'd gotten up at some point and crashed in one of the bedrooms. Totally normal. No big deal. But as time kept passing, that easy assumption started to feel off. Brianna wasn't the type to disappear without saying something. And she definitely wouldn't leave early without her phone. When they checked her room and realized she wasn't there, the mood shifted fast. They went back into the living room, this time actually paying attention. One of the blankets Brianna had used was still folded on the couch, exactly how she left it. The other blanket, though, was on the kitchen floor near the back door, nowhere close to where she'd been sleeping. Her stuffed bear was missing. And sitting right there on the pillow was a dark red stain that instantly made their stomachs drop. That's when panic really kicked in. They called Brianna's mom, Bridget, trying to explain what they were seeing without totally losing it. Brianna's wallet, phone, and bag were all still inside the apartment. She hadn't taken anything with her. At that point, it was obvious, Brianna hadn't just stepped out. Police arrived and started going through the apartment. There were no broken windows. No forced entry. Nothing looked ransacked. Investigators quickly learned the front door was usually left unlocked, something the roommates had never thought twice about before. But the pillow told a darker story. Forensic teams noticed multiple red stains and smeared mascara along one side. It suggested Brianna may have been crying earlier that night. More disturbing were small puncture-like impressions in the fabric. Investigators believed the pillow may have been pressed against her face to keep her quiet. That detail changed everything. The apartment was sealed off, and the case shifted immediately from missing person to something far more serious. DNA testing later revealed male DNA on the couch and door handle, along with Brianna's DNA on the pillow. There was no sign she left on her own. As word spread, fear moved through Reno fast, especially around the university. This wasn't some random disappearance in the middle of nowhere. Someone had slipped into an unlocked apartment, taken a sleeping college student, and vanished without leaving obvious signs behind. Then detectives uncovered something even more unsettling. In the months before Brianna disappeared, multiple women had reported violent attacks nearby. And suddenly, this case didn't feel random at all. When investigators compared evidence from those earlier assaults, they realized Brianna's disappearance might be tied to a predator who'd already been testing his limits, and wasn't done yet. By the time investigators took a step back and looked at the bigger picture, it was clear Brianna Dennison's disappearance wasn't some one-off nightmare. The more they dug, the more uncomfortable the similarities became. Detectives pulled reports from the months leading up to Brianna going missing, and a pattern started to form. Several women had already reported being attacked near the University of Nevada campus. Different nights. Different spots. Same kind of chaos. Each woman described being caught off guard, overpowered fast, and left shaken. None of them got a clean look at the guy, but one detail kept popping up. A blue pickup truck. 9 days after Brianna vanished, that detail finally clicked into place. A woman came forward to report a violent robbery and assault in a university parking lot. She couldn't give police a clear description of the attacker's face, but she was sure about the vehicle. A blue pickup. Newer model, possibly a Toyota Tacoma. Like the others, she survived. And like the others, she did exactly what she was supposed to do and gave police a DNA sample. Investigators didn't waste time. They compared the DNA from that parking lot attack with the evidence collected inside the apartment where Brianna had been taken. The result hit hard. It was a match. Same person. At that moment, everything changed. Brianna's case was no longer just about finding a missing college student. It was about stopping someone who'd already hurt multiple women and was clearly getting bolder. For Brianna's family, the realization was brutal, but it also meant the investigation finally had direction. Once police went public with the connection, more victims came forward. One woman described an attack that lined up almost perfectly with the others. Same approach. Same level of violence. Same terrifying sense that this guy knew exactly what he was doing. There was one detail that made investigators' skin crawl. Each victim reported that the attacker took something personal before leaving. Women's underwear. Not money. Not phones. Something far more disturbing. Police believed he was keeping them as trophies, a sign they were dealing with someone dangerous and escalating. In one case, a survivor managed to catch a partial look at her attacker's face during the struggle. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Using her description, police created a composite sketch and released it to the public, hoping someone would recognize him. The search for Brianna ramped up fast. Law enforcement, volunteers, students, everyone showed up. Fields, roadsides, empty lots, nearly 100 square miles were searched. People refused to sit back and do nothing. Because the earlier victims had survived, Brianna's mother held on to hope. As long as there were no answers, she believed her daughter might still be alive. But hope doesn't stop time. And almost a month after Brianna disappeared, someone driving past an empty stretch of land noticed something that didn't belong there, something that would end the search and shatter that hope. What that passerby discovered would confirm the worst fears imaginable, and mark the moment when this case took its darkest turn yet. On February 15, 2008, almost a month after Brianna Dennison vanished, a man driving near an empty lot on the edge of Reno noticed something that made him slow down. At first glance, it looked like trash, maybe a discarded mannequin or some kind of debris dumped on the side of the road. What stood out were the bright orange socks. They looked out of place. As he got closer, his stomach dropped. It wasn't a mannequin. Police were called immediately, and the area was locked down. Investigators didn't need much time to confirm what Brianna's family had been dreading. The body belonged to 19-year-old Brianna Dennison. The search was officially over, and the reality hit hard. Near her remains, officers found 2 pairs of women's underwear. One pair was quickly identified as Brianna's. The second pair didn't belong to her, and at first, no one could explain how it ended up there. That detail stuck with investigators. The autopsy results were brutal. Brianna had suffered serious injuries, and medical examiners determined she had been killed by strangulation. Evidence suggested she had been assaulted before her death. The level of violence shook even seasoned detectives. Then came the detail that changed everything. The second pair of underwear found near Brianna's body was eventually identified as belonging to her friend, one of the women who lived in the apartment where Brianna had been taken from. That realization was chilling. It meant the killer didn't just break in once. He had likely been inside the apartment before, moving through the space without anyone noticing. He wasn't guessing. He was watching. The idea that someone could enter their home, more than once, without raising suspicion sent fear through the entire community. Students locked doors they'd never worried about before. People changed routines. That sense of safety everyone took for granted was gone. Even with all this evidence, investigators still didn't have a suspect they could arrest. Months passed, and the case felt stuck. Public attention faded, but the fear never really did. Then, in November 2008, almost 10 months after Brianna disappeared, everything changed. A woman who had been traveling out of state confided in her closest friend. She said she'd found several pairs of women's underwear hidden inside her husband's truck. It wasn't just weird, it was alarming. The details matched the cases everyone still remembered. Her friend didn't hesitate. She contacted police through an anonymous tip program. The man she reported was 27-year-old James Michael Bila. Police moved fast. Bila was arrested quietly while dropping his young son off at daycare, going about his day like nothing was wrong. To everyone around him, he looked like a regular guy. But investigators believed he was anything but. James Bila was finally in custody. But proving he was the man behind Brianna's murder would require evidence so solid, it couldn't be denied. When James Michael Bila was finally arrested, investigators knew one thing right away: he wasn't going to make this easy. He denied everything and refused to give a DNA sample. No confession. No cooperation. He stuck to his story, hoping the case would stall without that final piece tying him directly to Brianna Dennison. But detectives weren't backing off. Instead of pushing him head-on, they took a different route. With permission from Bila's wife, they collected a DNA sample from his young son. It was a tough decision, but one that changed everything. The results showed that a close relative of the child had left DNA inside the apartment where Brianna was taken. That was the break they needed. Once Bila's own DNA was legally obtained, the match was undeniable. It linked him not only to Brianna, but also to 2 other women who had survived earlier attacks. Suddenly, every loose thread came together. As investigators dug into Bila's background, the red flags piled up. Years earlier, he'd been arrested for threatening someone with a knife. Co-workers described him as unpredictable and quick to anger. He had a blue pickup truck that matched what multiple victims had reported. Even though he'd sold it, police tracked it down and found fibers from Brianna's clothing inside. At that point, the case against him was solid. Bila's trial began in May 2010. Over the course of 2 weeks, the courtroom heard from investigators, experts, and most importantly, survivors. The women who lived through his attacks stood up and faced him. One asked him to look at her while she spoke. He couldn't do it. She didn't flinch. Prosecutors laid out what they believed happened that night. They argued that in the early morning hours, Bila noticed Brianna asleep on the couch through the apartment window. The door was unlocked. He walked in, attacked her while she slept, and forced her out of the apartment. To keep from being identified, he killed her. The defense tried to explain his actions by pointing to past trauma and a troubled upbringing. But the jury wasn't buying it. A hard past didn't excuse what he did. On May 27, 2010, James Bila was convicted on all charges. 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, along with multiple life sentences for his other crimes. Because of the strength of the evidence and the courage of the survivors, he would never hurt anyone again. In the aftermath, Nevada passed Brianna's law, requiring all convicted felons to submit DNA samples. If that law had existed earlier, this case might have been solved much sooner. Nothing could bring Brianna back. Her family had already lost too much. But her story changed laws, saved lives, and made sure what happened to her wouldn't be ignored. Brianna Dennison should have had decades ahead of her, and while her life was cut short, her impact is still felt, proving that even in the darkest cases, truth has a way of catching up.